Today's podcast is brought to you by Audible. Get a free audiobook download and a 30-day free trial at audibletrial.com/vocalminority. See, I changed it. That's www.audibletrial.com/vocalminority. Over 180,000 titles to choose from. I know at least two of our guests, both New York Times bestselling authors, D. Watkins out of Baltimore and Rabia Chowdhury, host of Undisclosed podcast. As a matter of fact, this season of Undisclosed, where they investigate the death of Freddie Gray, they have teamed up, and D. Watkins hosts the after the show, like John Cryer did on last season. So check out their books or the other titles they have to choose from, audibletrial.com/vocalminority. You know, I got in trouble the other day. I'm just going to be honest with you guys. I got in trouble with my ex-wife because I wanted to take my daughter out to my nephew's graduation, and she had 2 basketball games that she had to miss. My 13-year-old's a baller, plays all the time. But I got in trouble because I didn't know that those games were happening that same weekend, or I didn't let her know in advance, didn't prioritize, basically, which happens to me a lot. But we've got a new sponsor that I think can help with that. That new sponsor is called Team Snap. So it's every coach's and parent's dream. It's an easy-to-use, indispensable tool for organizing and communicating every aspect of team life. You know, had I had Team Snap at the time, I would have been able to avoid a lot of the frustration and headache. You know, over 15 million coaches, parents, team managers, and players use Team Snap right now. I would have been able to not have to worry about wrangling my schedule, practices, everything that I need to get done, scheduling the other items that would have popped up in a handy app on my phone. I would have been able to see it through email, through text, instant alerts. Wouldn't have been able to communicate directly with the coach and the other parents about her availability. I just could have done so much more. Basically, Team Snap gives you time back to yourself, so you don't have to worry about things you can schedule in advance. You can communicate effectively. It can manage any sport or group on the go. It's not limited to just sport teams. My younger daughter is a dance team. I've got to do the same thing. She's got dance class 2 days a week. We're going into summertime, so Team Snap is the way to go. They've got plans and prices to suit any team or organization. Their plans start at the low price, my favorite price of free. You know I'm on that rookie version. But for those of you guys who are a little more adventurous and have more schedules to manage, probably like I should be doing, most folks choose to upgrade to one of the more advanced plans, gives you more access. You can check out more information about Team Snap by going to www.tryteamsnap.com/vocalminority. That's www.tryteamsnap.com/vocalminority. You can sign up for a free 21-day trial. I'm definitely going there right now to upgrade. All right, got that out of the way. What's good, people? Welcome to another episode of Vocal Minority Report. It's your boy, MC. As always, you could have downloaded any podcast in the world, but you're here with us. I appreciate that. Got a great show for you today. My guest is Payne Lindsey. He's hosted the breakout hit investigative podcast, Up and Vanish. This conversation took a while to make happen because Payne is super busy, especially when I was trying to book him. And this is back in March, I believe. But shout out to Donald and Payne for making this happen. We recorded this in April. Obviously, I've been letting it marinate a little bit, but hey, we're back, all right? Episode 51. There have been additional updates and the podcast is still going, so I encourage everybody to go check it out once you listen to this episode if you haven't heard it already. Speaking of checking things out, go to thevocalminorityReport.com and our new improved site. It's new and improved because there are brand new pictures of yours truly, right? Showing my face. My face for radio is all over the place. Got some new professional promo pics. You guys check those out. In addition, I've updated all the guest photos. So every person we've had on the show's photo and a link to info about them is there. This is episode 51, so there's a lot of faces to see. You can hear all of our previous episodes there as well. I'm about to add more ladies' shirts to the store. Thank you, Eleanor, for the suggestion. We have V-necks coming for sure. But there's also the racer bags. There's the classics. Go check them out. Probably a price drop coming soon, but I don't know when, so don't wait for that. Just go see what you can get right now. All right. But most importantly, as I say every episode, and if you listen to other podcasts, you'll hear it too. Please leave us a rating on Apple Podcasts, formerly iTunes, maybe still iTunes, but Apple Podcasts on your phone or on iTunes. the iTunes store. It'll really help us, okay? It helps us because it helps get us more noticed the more ratings we have. You'd be surprised how helpful that is. Literally every show asks for this because it works. So let's see if we can move the Vocal Minority Report up the ranks on Apple Podcasts. Also, remember to subscribe to the show anywhere you get your podcasts. So here's episode 51, The Truth is Worth It, with director, writer, and content creator Payne Lindsey, host of Up and Vanished.
Previously on the Vocal Minority.
Are you part of the silent majority? Or are you part of the vocal minority?
Motherfuckers, go.
Attention, please.
If America can be saved, and I don't know if it's too late, but it'll be through a radio show like this new kind.
This shit here feels like the whole entire world collapse.
The revolution will not be televised, will not be televised, will not be televised, will not be televised. The revolution will be no rerun, brothers.
It's the vocal minority.
The revolution will be live.
Hello?
Hey, Payne, what's going on?
Who's it, man?
Hey, not too much. What a week for you, man. You know, you got Entertainment Weekly, and then you got the Vocal Minority Report. So, you know, it's a pretty big week for you. So how's it going?
It's going good, man. It's been a pretty crazy couple weeks, to say the least. But, you know, I'm hanging in there, and I'm going to get through it. And good things are happening all around. So.
No, that's good. But first things first, for real. So how's your grandmother doing?
Man, she's doing really good. I bet you right now she's probably about to have a glass of wine and make some more cowboy cookies. But she's doing awesome, man. She seems like she's 20, 30 years younger than she is in real life. So she's doing awesome.
I know she was proud as a peacock, as they say, of you and your work. I share those sentiments with her, you know, just for maybe not as deeply, obviously, what you were able to accomplish and spearhead, and, you know, hearing law enforcement acknowledge and thank the media. And I, like probably all of your listeners, immediately thought of you specifically. So yeah, definitely kudos to you. We've been fortunate on this show to talk to some other podcasters in the genre that have been able to affect change and reporting on these investigative stories. Bob Ruff, Rabia Chowdhury, Madeline Barron from In the Dark, so a couple other people. But you, I think yours is a bit different as far as Up and Vanished and the length of time of this case and kind of how your investigation, because I don't think those two guys were on your radar, but I'll get into that though. But before that, I wanted to ask you about Tenderfoot, what that is and maybe what spearheaded this all together for you.
Yeah, well, Tenderfoot is the name of my production company, and basically what we're doing in 2017 is we're going to make a couple different podcasts, and Up and Vanished is the first one, and there'll be a couple other true crime podcasts that are sort of spin-offs of Up and Vanished that we're really excited about announcing soon, and also some other podcasts that are completely unrelated. And then on the same front, we're going to be doing you know, stuff in the TV space eventually as well, and hopefully take some of the properties that we're working on, like Up and Vanished, and turn them into television series and put them on the big screen.
Okay, wow. Now, was that your initial intent to do Up and Vanished? Was this podcast to be like a funding mechanism for that initially? Was that always your intent to kind of go the podcast route, or were you more TV-based initially, and has that evolved over the success of the show?
Yeah, I mean, I wanted to do a TV series or a feature documentary first. That was the general idea, because at the time, that's all I actually did. All I did was filmmaking, and, you know, I wanted to have, you know, my big documentary project to work on, and, you know, I wanted to see my work on television. So I'm always gearing towards that. So I saw the podcast as a way of hopefully maybe just gaining enough notoriety to make that happen. After working several years in the film industry, I sort of learned that it costs a lot of money to do it right, and I had done it right before, and I had done it wrong before, and this sort of project seems so valuable and so important to tell the story the right way that I wanted to take a completely different approach and take it slow and, you know, start the podcast first. And I thought if the podcast worked, then maybe I could get enough people involved to make the TV thing happen. So that was kind of the general idea, and that's what we're trying to do now is, continue to make that happen. It's a long process, but we've met some really cool people along the way who are helping us out, and, we're excited about what's to come.
Congrats on everything that's happened for you guys. Obviously there's a lot of work that has gone into it. We've talked about the podcast and mentioned it by name, Up and Vanished, currently number 7 on I think they're called the Apple Podcast charts now. So congratulations for that, because I think that, for that indeed, because that's a pretty high honor. You're always up there here for a while now. And I think that makes you the highest rated host or show that we've had on the show. I think previously we had Mike Boudet. Yeah, we had Mike Boudet from Sword and Scale on. He's pretty high up there. That show is. So yeah, you're in the top 10. So for whatever that's worth.
Cool, man. I'll take it.
Yeah, no doubt. But let's talk about the podcast. I'll have you set it up, the story and what the podcast actually is and the subject matter. And then obviously I've got a million questions about the show and your investigation and everything that's happened since then.
Yeah, well, Up and Vanished is an investigative podcast about a missing woman named Tara Grinstead who went missing in 2005 from a small town called Osceola in South Georgia. And for years, no one knew what happened. And an entire decade went by, and police basically admitted they were no closer to solving it than they were the day she went missing. And there was a laundry list of persons of interest in the case and different associates in Tara's life that endured a lot of scrutiny over the years, and the GBI could never clear anybody, so it just left this open-ended for over a decade. So when I came in, it was extremely cold. It had been years since Tara's case had been in the news or anybody had done any sort of documentary project on it, and there was just so many unanswered questions. So I just started from the very beginning and retold her story and started calling people and meeting with people, and went to the town myself and went through the newspaper archives. And over the course of 8 months or so, I started gathering audio for a podcast and all of my phone calls and different interviews with people and former persons of interest, and just basically try to solve this thing. And my whole mindset from the beginning was, if I'm going to put all this time into this, if I'm going to do this at all, I'm going to do it for real with the intention of having some sort of positive impact on this case. Did I think it would be solved? No.
Right.
Did I want it to be? Absolutely. And on February 23rd, the GBI held a press conference in this case for the very first time in nearly 12 years. And they had made an arrest. A former student of Tara's named Ryan Alexander Duke was arrested for her murder. And a few weeks later, they arrested another former student, Bo Dukes, who had helped dispose of Tara's body. And so since then, it's been an absolute storm in the media and rumors flying, and now we have some truth coming out, and we're trying to make sense of all this stuff. And we're trying to patch up all the community and all the hurt that's plagued this community for years, and we're trying to get to the truth of what really happened to Tara and make sure that any of those responsible for her murder now have to pay for it, and there's justice.
That's a great description. I like hearing you actually recap it. It's a heck of a thing that you've done, initially having listened, never thinking that how many weeks in that the case would actually be solved. So that's tremendous for an active podcast to solve the case, and for your reporting or in investigating to kind of spearhead that, as we mentioned. I wanted to ask you too about Dr. Godwin. It's funny, I noticed a shift from he went from Maurice to Dr. Godwin as the season progressed. But
and I kind of switch it up sometimes. I just whatever I'm feeling at the moment, I'll call Maurice Godwin, Dr. Godwin.
Oh, okay.
I just kind of switch it up.
Okay, yeah, okay, cool. I wasn't sure if it was one of those things where he pulled you to the side and was like, "Hey, man, you know I'm a doctor, right? You know you can put I got this PhD, right?"
I don't know. Okay. What is it?
Okay. Yeah, no, cool. So no, but I'm just curious as far as your connection with him initially, if you can break that down and then kind of his feelings on everything. He was on this before you. Well, actually, I don't know when did you first hear about Tara? And off of that, when did you first hear from Dr. Godwin on the case?
I started digging around in this case in January of 2016. And at first, I didn't really know where to start. So I did what any person would do and just Google it and read as many articles on it as you could to at least look at what's happened over the years and learn the names of people and the places and the timelines of certain things. So I did that first, and then I found this website called Web Sleuth, and I made a post on that site saying that I wanted to do a documentary on Tara's case, and that if anybody wanted to help me out or had any theories or wanted to discuss anything about the case with me at all at that point, I was totally open to it. And sure enough, later that day, I got a phone call from Dr. Marie Scotwin, who was a private investigator that the family hired just a few months after she disappeared, and has basically been working this case slowly over the past 10, 12 years now. And he basically told me from the very beginning, he said, no one knows more than me than the GBI, and if you want to pursue this, then I'll help you out. And so I kind of took that as a sign to move forward and keep going. And from day one, he helped me out, helped me learn all the aspects of this case. And it's been a major asset to me throughout this entire podcast and the entire investigation.
Okay, cool. I could gather that from his insight and from his answering, that connection there. And I find it interesting because, I love true crime. I watch and listen to and read kind of armchair investigating, if you will. But for folks who, and obviously he's a professional too, but the fact that there's, websites dedicated, probably Reddit forums and people are talking about these cases ongoing is interesting. The fact that you knew to go reach out there to get that information. No, I like that. But, and this is such a complex case too, because saying it was solved now really doesn't even do it justice, because thinking through all of your episodes, immediately I'm thinking law enforcement must have been involved. So I'm curious for you, were you surprised that law enforcement wasn't involved?
No, not at all.
Okay.
I never thought that law enforcement was involved. I thought that there might have been some major oversight, and maybe there was some sort of relationship between certain people in Tara's life and law enforcement, and they sort of turned a blind eye to certain things. I never really believed that there was a cover-up. I can totally see why some people could get that vibe from it, because a lot of aspects in this case totally put that off, and I'm aware of that. But personally, I never really thought that as far as it being some sort of police cover-up. I thought that if the police were covering anything up at all, it was more of an oversight or overlooking somebody or giving somebody the benefit of the doubt that they should be, more or less.
Okay, I got you, and that makes sense, right? So yeah, not overlooking, but maybe not digging as deep into someone they may have had a relationship with, perhaps, or some connection with. I got you. Okay, so with that, how much interaction have you had since the solving of the case, and I guess prior to with officers? I know there's been statements from Marcus Harper and a couple, maybe another officer or so, but how much, when you were doing your investigation, was there any contact with those folks that they were open to, and then subsequently since then, have you been able to connect with any of them?
To be honest, I didn't really talk to anybody in law enforcement throughout the entire podcast. I did speak on several occasions with the Ocilla police chief. His name is Billy Hancock, and he was the first person on the scene the morning Tara was reported missing. And, he would help me out with, things in the town and things of that nature. But this is a closed case file in Georgia. Any unsolved case that's deemed pending or active, as deemed as an active investigation, is closed to the public. So any of the nitty-gritty details about basically all the stuff that I wanted to know, he couldn't tell me, and for that reason, he wasn't really a part of the podcast. So I kind of went into this thing almost blindfolded, and I didn't have a jump start with knowing what the GBI knew in order to maybe cross somebody off the list sooner, or not waste my time in this direction or that direction, and hone in on something. So I had to take a really broad approach from the beginning, and not leave anything or anybody out of it. and that was difficult to do because it was just so much information. So since the arrest, I have talked to the GBI on several occasions about different matters that they were concerned about, and just verifying information because their investigation is still active, and because Up and Vanished is one of the major, in a way, media outlets covering this case. They like to verify certain things that are said and this and that. So, they're just keeping tabs on stuff and want to make sure they're doing the right thing and covering all their bases.
No, of course, that makes sense. So what about any of the officers directly that the supposed relationships and connections with outside of the people directly investigating the crime, or her disappearance, some of the, relationships she had, the family members, there's a lot of law enforcement connections in relationships she had. What about those folks?
Yeah, so there was definitely a lot of associates in Tara's life. Her ex-boyfriend, Marcus Harper, was put under the microscope early on. Statistically, it often is a boyfriend figure or an ex-boyfriend who, is involved in somebody's murder. So that was someone who had to be looked at. And, certain things about his alibi seemed convenient.
Right.
And, nothing ever really added up all the way for everybody. So there was this huge gray area of, it was almost like you couldn't rule anybody out. So it made it difficult for investigators and really anybody else in the town or the community to, rule anybody out and move on past somebody. So it was just this open-ended thing, and people had different feelings and different viewpoints on it, and it really created this huge divide in the town of Osceola with picking different sides of people. There was a police officer from a nearby town called Perry who had left his business card in Tara's front door, and they found that on the morning that she was reported missing.
I thought that was so suspicious, man. As a listener, and someone trying to solve the case in my head, that was everything surrounding that. And obviously a lot of your listeners in the Q&A and the follow-ups, mentioned not doing more, but that was one of the things I drew so much from that. So I'm glad to know that it wasn't anybody like that, as far as I do know. Definitely that suspicion was weighed high with me for sure.
Yeah, man, that's a prime example of just all the weird stuff in this case. There's so many unexplainable things, and I think that sometimes in the world, weird stuff happens. That's the bottom line.
Right.
And when you have an unsolved mystery with no answers, all of these little weird things that happen become way more important and are looked at from every possible angle. And, it almost kind of perpetuates the rumors and the speculation. And it's unfortunate that's what happens when people are hurting and they want answers and they're not getting any.
Right. And speaking of that, her family specifically, because obviously, losing someone and her disappearance touches everyone who knew her, and you can tell from the people you spoke with throughout. But I'm curious, her family, were they accessible outside of Maurice or Dr. Godwin, in that regard during the investigation? I would assume you've connected with probably like law enforcement since then, but were you able to get some insight from them as well?
Not too much insight from her family. I communicated to them through the police chief in Osceola.
Okay.
And he sort of told them about the podcast and asked them if they wanted to be involved, and they declined because it was just such a sad thing to be involved in. But they showed their support in anybody who wants to tell Tara's story and to try to solve it. So the full support was there, but they were just hurting too badly to be a part of another story about this, which is completely understandable. But yeah, it's affected a lot of people, and I've talked to several people in Tara's life who were really close to her and were really affected by this, and it's been a really moving experience just seeing all of this stuff firsthand and really seeing them go from knowing nothing, not a clue of what happened to Tara, to seeing their reactions when there's been 2 arrests and the GBI claims that Tara's been murdered. So it's been a completely wild and unreal experience, and very, heartfelt.
Right, of course. And I think we should probably, and you can probably do this in a good capsulation, describe the town of Osceola to the folks. I mean, you paint a very vivid picture, on the podcast. But, I wonder if you can, because I'm curious, how many people, in Osceola, Tifton, those surrounding areas, actually knew what kind of happened, over these years, a lot of reluctancy with that. But I'm wondering if you could kind of describe that Osceola area for us.
Yeah, I mean, Osceola is just a southern Gothic town. It's this tiny little place. It's a quirky little town in South Georgia. There's not much going on. There's, I think, maybe 2 traffic lights, if that.
Oh, wow.
And it's population of around 3,000 people. And it's rural South Georgia. It's farmland, and there's a bunch of farmers. It's what people do around there. And it's a completely different lifestyle than up here in Atlanta. Completely different. And I was sort of familiar with South Georgia. I mean, my dad is from Albany. My grandma lives in Tifton, and my parents have a lake house in a tiny town called Fort Gaines. So, I grew up in Georgia, so I've been all around it, but I'd never really seen this small town dynamic before, where literally everybody knows everybody, and you walk into the restaurant with somebody and oh hey, and they all know each other, and you can kind of see how when something like this happens in a small town, it just never leaves it. People go missing every day in Atlanta, and sometimes you never hear about it.
Right.
But when someone goes missing in Osceola, it leaves a scar for years.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, that because it is so intimately and tight knit. I hadn't really thought about that. Yeah, I mean, everyone may loosely or tangentially have a connection actually to this person. It's not just a news story. So yeah, so it might really stick with you. You said something earlier about Tara's, or what the GBI is calling a murder. I'm misquoting you a bit, but you said something to that effect. I'm wondering, we certainly can't call this a rush to judgment after 11 years. What kind of room do you have left for doubt in this case after these arrests, or do you have any? I don't want to read too much into what I think I heard you say, but I'm just curious. After all this time and time to investigate, do you have any room left for doubt, or what's your confidence level if you had to give one on these 2 arrests? And I guess along with so we'll start there. Kind of how do you feel about that?
I'm feeling pretty confident about it. I think the GBI has the right people.
Okay.
That there is definitely more to the story, and maybe more to the story that will never come out unless someone like me or you goes in there and makes sure it does.
Right.
And I'm basing that off of some inside knowledge, but also just based on the fact that, hey, we haven't learned anything from the GBI or the police in how many years now? 11, 12? And why would we expect to learn any more now? And the judge in this case issued a gag order early on, just days after the first arrest, which basically means that any law enforcement is no longer allowed to talk about this.
Right.
So it just seems like they're just trying to bury it, move on, and just be done with it, which in a way I can understand, but it's what's far more important here is that, obviously Tara's family and all her friends get closure and get the answers they deserve. I also think that the community deserves answers too. There's been a lot of hurt all around in this thing. There's no need for us to just shut it up now. And so part of my job in the last few episodes of the podcast is going to be making sure I tell the whole story and to get as close to the truth as possible and make sure that no stone is unturned. And if there are any, major points in this case that are unknown at this point in time, I'm going to make sure that they're known by the end of this thing.
That's good because, I listened to, what episode I listened to here recently where you talked about, cause I was going to ask you about, did you ever think you'd be hiring an attorney and writing a letter to a judge about a gag order, when you started this? So.
No, I did not.
Right. So I assume you didn't. But along with that, you had on Philip Holloway. You had him on, explaining the gag order and really breaking it down, and then also explaining the more narrow version, because at first it was very broad, and then because of the media, you included, but I guess that local media as well, the judge was, I won't say forced, but had to or needed to make it much more narrow in scope, so the community and potential witnesses, which I guess is, in effect might be everyone in a small town, could still speak about the case. And so, but with that, you mentioned you wanted to keep investigating so you can really know what happened, because the town deserves that. And, there's been some interesting things in that gag order, the language of the arrest warrants, or that language explained by Philip Holloway, and then also the language of this gag order. Some of that language leads me to believe, and I believe you guys say this as well, that we might be going too straight to a kind of guilty plea, no explanation, as you mentioned. Would you agree with that? Am I correct in that assessment that that's what, how you guys are feeling? So that's why it's ever so important for you to really keep getting all these answers and doing everything you're doing?
Yeah, because at the end of the day, they're not obligated to tell everybody everything. It's in their best interest to have a short, straightforward trial, prosecution, conviction, and move on. They don't want an expensive trial that has to move to another town and have to drag this thing out and, hope for a conviction. They got the indictment and they want a guilty plea. Will Ryan plead guilty? I don't know. But I'm sure that's absolutely what they would want to do or want to happen here. And, we just can't count on anybody but ourselves to make sure the truth is out there. And I think that as long as we maintain that attitude and, maintain a level of respect for what's going on, we'll get to the truth. And that's what we're going to do.
So on the same trip that I went out of town that I got in trouble with, going to my nephew's graduation, I also left without my toothbrush, which presented a big problem the morning of the graduation, I'm sure you can imagine. So I had to figure out what can I do, or not what can I do. I had to figure out how to get a toothbrush, none in the house, where to go. Went to local, said big box store, ended up paying like $8 for an electric toothbrush. And I was so frustrated and so mad because, again, I like value, right? And I wish at the time I had known about one of our new sponsors, Quip. Quip is oral care designed for a modern lifestyle, developed to do the basics better, delivered fresh every 3 months for only $5, okay? One thing I did notice, though, is that with this $8 electric toothbrush, my teeth and my mouth felt great. I'd been used to using the standard ones. I don't know why. Maybe I'm just a dinosaur in that regard. So one of the first times I'd used an electric toothbrush, but now there's this brand who actually supports us, Quip, that is a modern oral care brand that designs beautifully simple electric toothbrushes and delivers affordable brush heads every 3 months to make a healthy brushing routine more simple. See, that's the thing. The $8 one I bought, the brush heads are expensive. I got to keep going back to the store. Now, Quip has taken that from that. Quip is an oral care designed for a modern lifestyle, developed to do the basics better. Delivered fresh every 3 months for only $5. 80% of us forget to replace our toothbrush on time. Had I not left mine, I would have still been using the same one who I've had for who knows how long. So Quip takes care of that. They'll send you fresh supplies to refresh. Swap in your brush head with fresh soft bristles and a recharged battery, and you're good to go. They've got a beautiful design. You should see these things. Slim design, premium materials, and color options. Quip matches your modern lifestyle to help transform brushing from chore to ritual. Quip's refill plan ships free worldwide, and you can cancel anytime. So for you, the listeners of the Vocal Minority Report, Quip is offering an opportunity to save $10 off refills at tryquip.com/vocal minority. That's tryquip.com/vocal minority. Okay, so now I want to go down a couple little pieces from the show, and then I got a couple questions about Ryan and Bo. So the decision to go down the Juan rabbit hole, I'm curious, because that I hate to say something that was probably, I don't know, how scary was that for you? Legitimately, how scary was that for you, or was it scary at all? Like, what was your real feeling and thought process around that? Yeah, we'll start there, and then I wonder if you can disclose anything additional about that. And then I got a couple more questions on that.
Are you talking about just in general in the case? Like, did you say rabbit hole?
Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm talking about Juan. The.
Oh yeah, talking about the Facebook guy.
Yeah, right. Yeah, the Facebook guy Juan. I thought that was a very interesting. I call it a rabbit hole, but whatever whatever. Yeah.
Exactly. No, yeah, it was. Yeah. Yeah, actually, his name was Jose.
Oh wow! Look at that. I see that. How terrible. I apologize to Jose. I don't know why. I live in Dallas, man. I blame. Who knows? My bad. All right. Sorry about that. Jose.
Yeah, no, that guy's name was Jose, and his Facebook name, his fake Facebook account was George Harrison.
Okay.
And long story short, actually before I even put this podcast out and even announced it and, said the name up and vanished on the internet anywhere, this guy started messaging Dr. Godwin, the private investigator I've been working with over the past few months, and saying really weird things like Payne Lindsey's going to solve this, and Up and Vanish will solve this, and it seemed like he had inside knowledge of what I was doing, and so I sort of feared beyond that maybe certain areas that I was digging around in was where this guy was, and maybe he either knew what happened, or maybe he was the killer. And so I really didn't know, and I waited till around, I think it was episode 10, before I even mentioned this in the podcast, because during that whole time, I had still been trying to figure it out who it was. And I hadn't figured it out yet when I announced it. But I thought, I'm tired of looking. I have all these hours of audio of me trying to figure it out. Maybe if I put this out here, I can figure out who it is. And sure enough, within, I think, 2 episodes, we figured out who it was through this weird chain of events with working with another private investigator.
Right.
This same person had met in person a year prior, and all these things just added up, and we eventually figured out who it was, and we ruled him out as a suspect and just determined that it was somebody who had become obsessed with this case in a very unhealthy way, and, was just sort of taunting me and Maurice and just getting some enjoyment out of that. But, we outed him and we moved on.
Okay, interesting. Okay, so there was no real so no connection with him and Ryan and Bo, or no, they weren't classmates, and no connection there that you're aware of.
No, but you're right, because he did claim to be a former student of Tara's whenever he met with the private investigators.
Okay.
And looking back on that now, it's very ironic that the two arrests made in Tara's case were 2 former students.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
It's definitely ironic, but, personal opinion, and from what I know, it's unrelated. It's just a strange coincidence, like all the other ones in this case.
Wow. Okay. Well, again, in my head, I had a whole nother story there that he might. Interesting. That.
Yeah, I can totally see why you could think that way. It's just weird. Just things like that don't make any sense, and you think to yourself, surely this has something to do with this. I mean, what are the chances of that? I've said that, near 100 times probably in this case at this point. So I'm just getting used to it at this point.
Of course, right.
You gotta keep the blinders on, and don't be fooled by all these sorts of things. And you kind of, as you do get fooled, at least I eventually learned that, hey, I was fooled. But I never really put all my chips in one of those directions. I never put all my cards on the table and revealed everything that I was doing, or said, hey, I think this is the guy who did it. I always kept an open mind, because really, I thought one of 2 things happened. I always thought that Tara, unfortunately, was most likely dead, and that she did not run away on her own. I just didn't think that was possible.
Right.
So I thought that, and then as far as who may have done this, I thought it's either somebody on the radar that we've already talked about, who for some reason is just really good at covering himself up, or it's somebody else that Tara knew that we don't know about, who just happened to be at the right place at the right time to fool law enforcement. And if you look at Ryan Duke, that's kind of what you could infer happened, is a guy who's not very bright, who for some reason, whatever reason, hopefully we'll eventually find out, was at Tara's house that night and killed her. So, I think that it's hard for law enforcement to figure out who did it when there's zero trace to it. He wasn't a active person in her life. They knew each other, but he was so off the radar and there was no trace left. It was just right place, right time. Nobody saw it. And what did you expect? Unless there's a witness and there's evidence left behind and you're not a, active associate in her life, how in the world are you ever going to find out unless somebody tells somebody? And that's what ultimately happened.
Okay, so yeah, because I'm trying to think of what could happen over this 11 years that I guess now 12 years or close to that. I mean, was it loose lips sink ships? If you and I don't mean to chuckle at people keeping a murder or disappearance,
right?
But as far as, do you think that what pressure burst this pipe in your opinion? Because were Ryan and Bo on your radar at all? I mean, I know obviously the one episode, which is great, where Bo's name is edited out, and obviously then the next week or shortly thereafter you play it because he's been arrested at that point. But were they on your radar at all? And what do you think prompted this to happen? Because if a secret's been kept that long, I'm wondering why a podcast. And no disrespect to the podcast, obviously, I love it, but why would a podcast compel someone to then start running their mouth now? And again, I mean, I'm glad it happened, but I'm just wondering what kind of thoughts you put in there, and again, were they on your radar at all in all your conversations?
Yeah, so I had never heard the names Ryan Duke and Bo Dukes, but you have to understand too that there's hundreds of names that I had heard of over the course of this thing, and unfortunately those were two names I never did hear, but I did hear names of their friends and their friend circle, and I thought on the day of Ryan Duke's arrest that there was just no way that somewhere in all the files that I created over the past year that there was not some sort of clue leading to one of these guys. I just felt like it was impossible. Maybe part of it was a pride thing, but I couldn't really believe it because it just didn't make any sense for the killer to still be living in the town and not be somebody who I've, bumped shoulders with in some sort of way. And so I did a lot of digging, and it took really less than an hour where I found a picture on my phone from August, which was the month that the podcast came out. This was before episode 2 and right after episode 1. And I had a picture on my phone that was sent to me, and I was looking into somebody else, whose name I won't say at this moment in time, but I was looking into this person and their friends, and I was sent this picture, and it's a bunch of guys sitting on the back of this truck bed, and sure enough, Bo Dukes is smack dab in the middle of it.
Oh, wow.
And this was a picture from 2005. So I was looking at somebody who knew what happened to Tara and did a very heinous thing and disposed of her body in a disgusting way. And I was looking at him and I just had no clue. And there's a lot more things like that I've come to figure out and connect some of the dots. And everything started to make a lot more sense to me once I was able to learn these names. And I think that once I paint the full picture to everybody, it'll make perfect sense, and everybody will understand how maybe we weren't really that far off the whole time. And regardless if we were or not, these are the right people, and this is the full story, and that's what we want.
Right. Okay. So let me ask you. I don't know how much you've been able to talk to my girl Nancy Grace a couple times, and maybe more than that. Probably you probably she's in Atlanta too, right? Or somewhere around there, maybe. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. But I was curious to know, like, are you as steadfast as her? And I think you are. But Ryan and Tara didn't have a relationship, and obviously others have said that too. But I'm curious, your opinion on that. And I don't, I read things into things, so I'm just curious. Can you speak to that, their relationship or lack thereof, and the confidence level on that?
I mean, I think there was some sort of relationship. I mean, they knew each other.
Well, right. I mean, I know teachers from my high school, but that didn't mean I was at their house,
Right. So, I mean, in theory, if Ryan knocked on her door and she answered it, she would know who he is, and maybe she would trust him. As far as any sort of relationship beyond that, romantically or something, I really don't know. I don't think anybody knows, and it's kind of a tough thing to speculate on. But, I'm keeping all things in consideration, and, at this point in time, I don't have any reason to believe that there was something more going on. And if there was, I think it was mainly in Ryan's head and not hers.
Interesting. Okay, right. Yeah, and it seems like that's a pretty interesting case study of who Ryan is as well, Ryan Duke, because his friends' impressions of him and the alcohol. I don't know if it's drinking problem, alcoholism, however you want to, however that would be described. That was interesting. The wrinkle of the 911 call, and that that's extremely interesting. That one night, and then the explanation kind of for that as well. It really got me thinking about, if you might be more compelled under pressure to come clean about something, especially having had a history of that, or at least the one story that the one friend told, and then also thinking about someone drinking too, which just thinking about that, how that affects the brain, and okay, I could see how those things might come together. And again, that's strictly conjecture on my part, but just trying to piece together how after this time that, okay, maybe, and that's assuming that his level of involvement, there's really no question in that statement there, but I'm curious if maybe there is a question there as far as your opinion on that, because do you believe that the level of involvement for Ryan was, like, the culpability, is it equal between Ryan and Bo in your opinion, or do you have any opinion on that of whom, based on the way they were arrested and the language, obviously it's pretty clear, but I'm wondering, or are you think you're going to get there in your investigation on your reporting?
Well, we're definitely going to get there.
Okay.
The indictment and the arrest warrants for Ryan Duke say that he murdered Tara by himself at Tara's house, and he by himself then took her body to another place in a nearby town of Fitzgerald and put it on the property of Bo Dukes. And from that point forward, Bo Dukes assisted Ryan in covering up this crime. And so that's what the warrants allege, what the indictment says for Ryan Duke. So we really have that to go off of, and beyond that, we have to conduct our own investigation. Is Bo more involved? I don't know. Is there more to the story? I definitely think so. I think that a lot of people are puzzled as to why and how Ryan ends up at Tara's house and how he kills her and why he kills her. It just doesn't make any sense to people. And I think a lot of people are also puzzled by Bo's involvement. Why did he so willingly do this? And there's a lot of unanswered questions, and not all of it makes sense. And that's obviously nothing new in this case, but now that we have some serious movement in this thing, it's time to really dig deep and get to the bottom of it while we can. And so that's what we're going to do. And I feel confident that we're going to get some resolutions here.
Well, no doubt. I mean, I guess based on your recent track record, you've certainly been able to affect change as the buzz statement of the day or phrase of the times we're in. So I definitely, I have no doubt. And I would think that now, based on everything, obviously people are much more willing probably to come forward. I would assume there's a lot of comfort in having people arrested, and especially if your level of confidence is so high, I would assume that the towns and surrounding areas, a lot of the folks feel that same way. So, folks might be a little more apt to let things know. And after all this time, so what about Bo's? This is one thing I hadn't really thought about. And what about Bo's relationship with Tara? I mean, would you say that it would be the same as Ryan as far as, well, yeah, she knew him, former student, but, you know, has there been any, I haven't really heard a lot of talks about Bo's possible relationship with Tara outside of, you know, anything, you know, beyond student, former teacher. I know that, I mean, Bo's mom doesn't live next door, does he? Or she lives really close, correct?
Yeah, she lived close, but that's not where Bo was staying at the time.
Right.
I mean, Osceola and Fitzgerald are close together. The town's really small. Everyone kind of lives close to everybody. And so it wasn't really that big of a coincidence that someone related to him lived close to Tara. But I guess as far as his relationship with Tara, again, it's just a big question mark. I mean, we know that he was a former student. You know, was there something more going on there? Maybe, maybe not. You know, we don't really know, but that's, you know, something that we're going to, you know, search for and get to the bottom of.
And to be clear, when we say former student, are we, because I don't recall, are we talking about student like as in they went to the same school where she was a teacher, or she actually taught them in a class?
Yeah, I mean former student as in Tara was their teacher.
Okay, that's what I thought.
They
Okay.
graduated a few years prior.
Okay.
So they were young, and she was, you know, 19 years older than them.
Gotcha. Okay. Gotcha. All right. Cool, man. I think that's all I have as far as on the podcast and the story. It's a great show. I call it a show, but it's a great podcast, a great piece. Even having the fuller story now, not the full story, but more of it now. You know, there's still for folks who will listen to this episode who have not heard Up and Vanished. You should still listen to it because everything is there. You know, it's going, you still get to go with Payne through this investigation and get and feel. And I still think you'll get some, I don't know if gratification is the right word, but it's certainly worth it to listen to every episode from, and start from the beginning to know and to get to know about Tara too, because she is a person, you know, was a person. And, you know, you did a good job, I think, capturing who she was as well. So folks should listen to that. So what's next for the podcast? I mean, you're still making episodes. You've got the case evidence and it seems like you got 2 or 3 supplemental shows, you know, or, you know, I know you're working nonstop on it. So what's season 2 look like? And is that going to be more of the investigation for Into the Case? You start season 2, or what's coming up next?
Yeah, I mean, sleep has been pretty non-existent for 2017, but we're going to continue the Up and Vanish podcast with more episodes until the story's been told. And I think that we're getting close to a point where we have most of the information that we're looking for. There's still some unanswered questions and different people that we want to talk to, and it's ongoing, and every day it changes, and there's still a lot of movement in this case. So, you know, we're not just going to abandon it. We're going to stick through this thing and tell the story, but at some point that will come to a close, and we will complete this story in the best way possible. And like I said, we are working on a couple other podcasts, some true crime podcasts based off of other cases and some different personalities we've had on the Up and Vanish podcast in the past, and also some completely unrelated podcasts, more interview style stuff. And on top of that, we're doing everything in the TV space. And as far as the future of Up and Vanished, beyond season 1, there will be a season 2, and it will be a brand new case. And we're going to take pretty much all that we've learned from season 1 and apply it to a brand new case and dig in there and see if we can have an impact.
All right. No, that sounds good. I can't wait to hear that. And actually, I have to talk to you. I got a case here in Texas that I need to talk to somebody about. So maybe we'll I'll share that with you because it's a crazy ass story. But anyway, so yeah, no, well, cool. I appreciate it. Like I said, I enjoy the show. But yeah, really great to have you on, and really, you know, like I said, what you were able to do to, you know, let's say that I think it's whatever you did, the pressure. And I guess we can close with this. Do you feel that you directly are responsible for? Well, let me rephrase that question. just, I guess, how do you feel? You know, I mean, the people that were arrested weren't on your radar screen, but there has been arrest. Everyone feels confident that these are the guys. You're going to get down to the story. I mean, you couldn't have imagined that when you first started out. So I'm just curious, you know, and how do you feel about it? You know, when you get the credit and the accolades and people say that you solved the case, you know, how does that make Payne Lindsey, you know, how does that make you feel?
I mean, it feels really amazing to, I've been a part of this podcast and, you know, there be a positive outcome from it and a positive ending to the story. You know, that's what you want going into it. You want to have that ending. You want to have that resolution. Not only from a podcast show episode standpoint, but from a life standpoint. You know, it's what you hear every Monday on Up and Vanished podcast episodes. There's a lot of time in real life that goes into those. A lot of real relationships that have been built over the course of over a year that allow that to happen every week. So it's much bigger than it started out. Obviously the audience has grown and that's amazing, but really what's bigger than that is the community that is affected. It's, you know, I feel weird about taking credit for solving it, and you know, I think that the podcast, I mean, the best way to put it to me is I think the podcast and the continued spotlight on this case and everybody talking about it again is what created an environment for the truth to come out. The truth isn't going to come out when no one's talking about it. You know, you have to wonder if somebody just spoke up and confessed something, you know, what compelled them to confess? Would they have confessed if it wasn't on their mind? So that's the kind of the way I look at it. I think that in some way, shape, or form, all of us who've kept this case alive are, you know, responsible for making this happen. I think that anybody who's ever told this story and kept the spotlight on it, you know, should pat themselves on the back here. I think that it was a joint effort. It wasn't just me. It wasn't Up and Vanished. It was the whole community. You know, everybody throughout all the uncomfortable parts of talking about this and just, you know, started talking about it again. And it was difficult and people had a hard time and it wasn't always easy. But I think that people now can say, hey, that was worth it. So I think that that's really the best way to put it. I think that if you're going to go out and do your own investigative podcast, really what you hope for, beyond just finding the clue yourself that put somebody in prison, that would be amazing. But beyond that, you want to create something that puts an atmosphere in this community and town that encourages people to come forward and encourages people to talk about it. Because without that, no truth is coming out. I think that Up and Vanished has proven that. And so that's what I take from it.
No, I would agree. And I think you said something really good there. Yeah, the truth is worth it. That's certainly, I mean, no, I like that. So I think that's a good note actually to end it on. I appreciate that explanation there. So thanks a lot for your time, man. If I could ask one thing more of you, if you could just a liner so we can prove that we had, you know, somebody, number 7 on the iTunes charts, you know what I mean? But I can get you to identify yourself and say that you're a part of the vocal minority. That'd be great. And that's all I got for you, man.
Hey guys, my name is Payne Lindsey. I host and produce the podcast Up and Vanished, and I'm on the vocal minority.
Beautiful, man. I appreciate it. Thanks a lot. This has been the Vocal Minority Report. All power to the people. Peace.
This has been a Vocal Neighbors production.